Oh brother, are we in for a lot of drama today?
How you get so big getting food of this kind?
Hello and welcome to that time of the week again where we discuss the newest episode of Star Wars Resistance, and dang, that's pretty much like the first impression I can have. So we got what a lot of us have been wanting, which is more information on Yeager. We got to see more actual racing, more kind of the culture on the platform of Colossus. It really felt like, minus anything to do with the First Order, it had everything we kind of wanted in this show, and something we'd kind of taken a break from for a while as we've been dealing with the First Order and pirates a lot in the last few weeks. Before I say anything more, I will say this is a spoiler review, so I'm going to get into some details of the episode, so if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you watching it before we continue. So in this episode, Yeager's estranged brother is in town seemingly for the Platform Classic, which is the biggest, most excitingest race we've seen to date on the Colossus. The aces get involved, and this time, others get involved as well. Captain Doza himself asks Yeager to race in the big show. Supposedly, this is because he wants to draw a lot of attention, and it would be a big deal to get Yeager in the race. I think in some ways it's probably connected to the fact that this superstar is there, that Marcus Speedstar is there, and that Doza figures, getting Yeager involved would just kind of double the action and double the excitement. But there's a catch. Yeager doesn't race anymore, and he certainly doesn't race against his brother. When we saw Yeager's family in a photo in a previous episode, I assumed that it would become a plot line at some point in the show. I didn't think they would go so far as to get into it in the first season, but actually, ironically enough, this episode had a lot of ties to the episode, I think it's called Fuel for a Fire. It's the one with Elijah Wood in it. And that episode was probably my least favorite to date, and don't take that as I didn't like it, it's just my least favorite so far. But it pulled in a lot of stuff from that episode. There's a big deal that Marcus uses hyperfuel in a race many, many years prior, and that gets him in trouble. Of course, Kaz has to stop his friend Jace from using hyperfuel in a race in that episode. It's just the episode where we learn about Yeager's family, and we learn that Yeager was at the Battle of Jakku. Oddly enough, it's kind of funny because at one point Kaz is talking to the brother, and Kaz is like, yeah, I know these things about Yeager, the family, and Jakku and stuff. And he's like, oh, he told you? And Kaz is like, yeah. And then Yeager's like, did he tell you, blah, blah, blah. And really Kaz is just sitting there like, I'm not going to tell him that it's because I snuck into your office. But I really liked how we're already pulling something in from an episode like that. Now, I always anticipated that episode was laying groundwork, and where it felt like filler, it was the type of kind of character filler that you needed that was going to kind of come into play, but I didn't expect them to bring it into the first season, so they're really kind of moving the show along, and I think that's a very good thing. But if I'm to understand this episode correctly, I think the reason why the brothers were estranged is Marcus, in a race, used the hyperfuel, which caused an explosion, which caused several racers to crash, which somehow led to the death of Yeager's wife and child, which is pretty terrible, understandably. And that was pretty dramatic because I feel like the whole episode, everyone's like, Yeager, you should forgive your brother. He's your brother. You should super forgive him, though. And then it's like, yo, you killed my wife and child. I'm like, oh, okay, the estrangement makes way more sense. I mean, he should probably still eventually reconcile with his brother because it wasn't like murder or something. I get where Yeager is coming from in this episode, I guess is what I'm saying. And suddenly it was like, I think y'all are not understanding the seriousness of the situation here, because that's pretty intense, if I'm being honest. I assumed his family was dead, but I thought it was like a First Order attack or something, and not like sheer freak accident from kid brother. Now, of course, the two brothers do reconcile because, contrary to what a lot of people believe, Star Wars is about family and coming back together and forgiveness, and that's something we should all remember next December. That's an entirely different topic of discussion. Here, today, now we should remember that the brothers became brothers again, and it was a very nice reconnection. I know that Yeager has kind of been the top name on a lot of people's hit lists on who a spy might be or who a traitor might be, and this episode is making me feel more and more like that's not the case. Now, this could be the episode's kind of setting me up to trick me, but it doesn't feel like the MO. I just don't know that it's gonna be Yeager at this point. He's just done too much to actively teach Kaz how to be a good person, and then to have this kind of background, I just don't see it. If we had found out that, like, Yeager's family had died as the result of a botched mission with the Resistance or the New Republic, then maybe. I just don't get what his motivation would be to be involved with the First Order in any way. To go back to the brother for a second, what's pretty fun about him is he kind of had this Han Solo-esque vibe about him. You know, he's hanging out in the bar with his cool alien sidekick, and he owes money to the Death Gang, and all of this stuff kept happening. So that I don't know how intentional that was, but that was kind of fun for me to kind of get that vibe off of him, especially because we're so used to Han Solo, so to kind of see the Han Solo character as a brother was just a new kind of dynamic to that kind of character type in Star Wars. I will also say that if you watch that scene in the bar again and listen close, the background music is 100% straight out of KOTOR. Like 100. They just took the audio file and didn't even like re-record it, and I got really, that's probably, to be completely honest, that's what excited me more than anything else in that episode, was to just hear that cantina music that I'm so used to hearing when you're just standing around trying to figure out how on earth to make that one lady dance. That's a good move. Let's dance very close and face to face. To backtrack to the topic of moles for just a second, I also think it's kind of interesting that Doza and Yeager are apparently friends. I thought it was kind of odd last episode that Doza was relying on Yeager so much. Like, why is Yeager's shop the top shop on the Colossus? Because I didn't really get that vibe before, but now I'm kind of seeing it appears that Doza and Yeager have some sort of connection, and I like seeing that, you know, it goes to that there's more to Yeager than meets the eye, and that he's, you know, pals with the top dog in the station, but still chooses to kind of live outside of the tower. And before we continue on, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the race itself, because this race felt like so much of what this show was promising to be about. Racing. We saw the aces in spaces fighting for the top places, and it was cool. The one thing I've kind of been disappointed with the aces is they made such a big deal on like who's voicing them and bringing in all these different really well-known voice actors, whether it's in acting in general or within the Star Wars community more specifically. But we really haven't spent a lot of time with the aces, which is kind of odd. Like, most of the time when we see them, they don't even talk. So that's something where I hope that we do get to know them more as time goes on, but we're still only like, what, halfway through the first season, so there's plenty of time for that. Seeing the race itself, though, was really cool. This was a really neat race. It started with an obstacle course, and then you had to like fly to outer space, and then you had to try to not crash coming back to the water, and it was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of high action. I was pretty certain it was going to be a thing of like Yeager suddenly loves his brother again, and he was going to sacrifice winning the race for him. What I was really happy to find out is that the brother was actually this good person again. I was really afraid that it was going to end where Yeager lets his brother win, and then it turns out the brother was a bad guy, and it didn't go that way. I liked that we kind of actually got a win for Yeager, even if he didn't win the race. That he can start getting these people back in his life, because it's obvious that he's a guy who has a lot of love in his heart, but doesn't have people around that he really feels like expressing that to anymore. And besides all that sappy stuff, the race was just really fun to watch. And then the last thing I'll say about this episode is I just loved Niku and his new best friend. I kind of like how there's just this little thing with Niku each episode. Like, he can't always be a major character in the show, but even then they're going to give him at least that moment, if not that running joke, and him bonding with Marcus's mechanic just really made me happy. But those are my thoughts on the episode. Let me know what you thought. What do you think about the series so far? What do you think we're going to see going forward? If you're not already, please follow us on Twitter at Port Haven Forums and visit port-haven.com for even more. And until next time, keep it real and fly casual.
Cooking can be fun.